No matter what, we come together for the good of our constituents, and I'm proud and honored to lead the People's House of the New York State Legislature.
The health and protection of the human beings that live in our districts is our responsibility.
Frederick Douglass's words for us today, I quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress."
If you want equity to happen, then this is where it happens.
All of us have a responsibility to the greater good.
The House will come to order.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be discussing the Independent Redistricting Commission with our guest, Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thank you very much for coming in.
Here we are again.
Yes, we are. And the redistricting has just been kind of going on and on and on, but of course it's important to get this right. Why don't you give us a little bit of background? I could get into it, but you know much more about it than I do. So,
so every 10 years after the census, the legislative lines are redrawn, the Assembly, the Senate, and Congress. And with Congress, it's known as reapportionment because before the lines are even drawn, they have to determine how many districts are in each state. The total number of members of Congress has been constant since, I don't know, the early 20th century. And therefore, some states pick up, some states lose, others stay the same. This time around, New York actually lost a seat, and if we had approximately 30 more people, which we did, but they weren't all counted, we would not have lost the seat, but we did. So in 2014, we set up in the state constitution what's called an Independent Redistricting Commission to try to take the politics out of it, and there were certain guidelines, can't be partisan, we shouldn't be protecting incumbents, and just a number of things. So the commission consists of 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and they couldn't come to an agreement 2 years ago. So what happened was the Democrats on the commission and the Republicans on the commission each put forth their own proposed sets of lines, and they were rejected by the legislature. So under the Constitution, if the commission sends us a set of lines, we can reject it. They send us a second set. If we reject it, then the legislature itself would have to draw the lines. So it ended up in a stalemate. There were court fights. So the Republicans brought a lawsuit in Steuben County. Now, if anybody can tell me where Steuben County is, but it's in New York, and the acting Supreme Court justice, Supreme Court being the lowest trial court, in that case ruled that the congressional lines did not follow the guidelines of the Constitution under the redistricting, and that it was gerrymandered, meaning it was meant to help one side. This was after the legislature imposed its own lines. So the judge appointed what's called a special master. It's like an expert to independently draw the line. So after this thing went through the court process, the Supreme Court, the Appellate Division, Court of Appeals, the special master put forth a set of lines. Now, the special master was a person from another state, and presumably didn't know much about New York, but certainly not about all the nitty-gritty details. They put forth a set of lines, and that's the lines that members of Congress ran under last time. And when the election took place, a number of seats switched from Democrat to Republican in the election in 2022. So not everybody was happy with that. I personally think that the lines were drawn more favorably to the Republicans, but if the political climate was a little different in 2022, the Democrats probably could have won several of those seats anyway. And there was like silly things that they did. For example, the amalgamated houses in my district, a very major housing development, was split. Why? 2 of the buildings were put into Congressmember Torres's district, and the rest of it was put into Congressmember Espaillat's district. Now, I understand all the districts have to be exactly the same size in terms of population, but they're not supposed to do that. Did it anyway. So last year, Democrats brought a lawsuit saying, well, what the lines were done for last time around was only for that one term, for the 2-year period, and therefore the IRC, the Independent Redistricting Commission, has to propose a second set of lines since they only put forth lines once 2 years ago. And of course, that whole process went through court. One side said, no, those lines were for the 10 years. And then the other side said, no, they were just for 2 years. Well, it ultimately went to the State Court of Appeals, and they ruled on the side that said that was just temporarily for 2 years. So we have to go through the process again. So the Independent Redistricting Commission met, and by a 9-1 vote, so bipartisan for the most part, with one Democrat dissenting, they put forth a new set of lines, which were, in almost all cases, identical to the current lines. So where we stand now is that the legislature can reject those lines and then draw its own lines, or not reject it. But yesterday, the legislature rejected those lines. So today, or maybe later in the week, we're going to vote on another set of lines, which presumably will be the lines that members of Congress run under, except those lines could be challenged in court by anybody who doesn't like them. So it's, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. By the time this is aired, everything probably will have been done already. But in terms of what's being proposed, I don't think there are any major changes that affect my district, but there are some changes that are being recommended. And we'll know this week. And we do have a congressional election this year, along with Assembly, Senate, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's redistricting is always a messy process, and one side or the other always dislikes the outcome, and so in so many cases it goes to court. In some states, the partisanship, whatever people think of the New York process, it pales in comparison to the hyper-partisanship in some other states, and it's usually one particular political party, who shall go nameless, but it's not mine, that engages in that kind of hyper-partisanship. And it could affect the control of Congress, because right now, the majority in Congress, it's almost evenly split. So a swing of a few seats could make the difference in terms of which party controls the Congress. And that could have an effect on the future of our country, given everything that's going on right now. So it's easy to understand why some people think we should do everything we can to make sure that we elect the right people to Congress this year, because who knows what could happen.
So technically, what would a deadline be to get this completed?
Well, Tuesday, February 27th, which is today, is the first day that candidates can circulate designating petitions to get on the ballot. It should be done by today, but if it's not, because it can't be done by today unless the governor gives the legislature what's called a message of necessity, which would mean a waiver of the 3-day waiting period for legislation to be considered. If we don't do it today and there's a delay, then that could delay the petitioning process for, at least for congressional candidates. So I guess you could say there's no real deadline. I mean, that seems to be how things are in Albany. Deadline, schmedline, that seems but there really is a deadline, and it should get done today. That's the right thing to do, and I hope that's what happens.
We'll follow up on this next week and just, see how it all panned out. Where are we in the budget process? How about that?
So it's the very end of February. We have a little over a month. We're getting to the point where things start to get more serious. For the past several weeks, different groups, different organizations, different interests have been, pushing their point of view on the budget. We're going to get, I think we're going to get this week the revenue forecasts, and that'll give us guidance in terms of figuring out how much money is there to spend. And the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor almost never agree on that number, but hopefully they'll be close. I think the biggest challenge we have this year is that the massive amounts of money that came in because of COVID from the federal government has essentially disappeared, because it was never meant to be permanent. And so we have to live within our means. And some of the good things we did during COVID to deal with that emergency aren't supposed to be permanent. But of course, some people think, well, we had this so far, so we have to have it forever. It doesn't really work that way, and it can't. So we have to adjust to dealing with that, and we want to make sure our schools are funded and that healthcare is funded and all the other priorities that all of us have. So that's what the next 4 or 5 weeks will be about. At some point, both houses will each pass their own budget resolutions, one house budget resolutions, and then the real negotiations, move into full steam between the two houses and as well as the governor. And the deadline technically is March 31st. March 31st is, I believe, Easter Sunday. I'm sure we're not going to be in session, nor should we, on Easter Sunday. The 29th is Good Friday. So if we don't pass the budget by March 28th, it means we're going to be late because we'll have to go into the following week. So hopefully that won't happen.
We'll see what happens with that also. Let's talk about your district. Con Ed is doing some work in your district.
Yeah, Con Ed is doing major work on Sedgwick Avenue in the Van Cortlandt Village section of my district, and it's going to cause like a lot of disruption and inconvenience for people there. I think they're replacing cables, major cables, and who knows what else they're doing. So on Sedgwick Avenue, running from Van Cortlandt Avenue West down to I think Fort Independence Street, that whole area at one point or another over the next few weeks, there's going to be significant work being done. I think they may be working around the clock. We're going to lose a lot of parking, and that's really bad, particularly in that area, because parking is horrendous as it is. And there might be alternatives for people. It's several blocks away on Goulden Avenue. In the past, many people could have parked, but these days, now we're seeing trucks parked there all the time and RVs, and so we're going to have to work with the police to try to get those removed that shouldn't be there, just to try to make things a little bit better for people. But it's going to be a major hardship, I think, in that area. It's necessary work, but that's not going to make people happy. Right. I mean, I guess it'll be happy when they have their electricity, but I'm not even sure what the cables specifically are for, frankly. Yes. But work has to be done.
The last thing I want to talk about is this potential development that you're concerned about in your district.
It's actually in the same area. So there's a developer who has either purchased or is purchasing several pieces of property that are all adjacent to each other. The Van Cortlandt Jewish Center, that building, that's a pretty big building. The old library, several years ago we got a new library a few blocks away, so that building has been empty. And then just south of that, there are these beautiful single-family homes, and it's been an ongoing problem whereby developers have been purchasing single-family homes and replacing them with apartment buildings, and nobody really likes that. I know I don't. So if the developer is able to amass that entire piece of property, that's going to undoubtedly lead to a very large development. I haven't seen any plans. I don't know any specifics, but I know that would involve a significant change in character in the community, and that would really be most unfortunate. It's a beautiful, Van Cortlandt Village is a gorgeous neighborhood, and to lose some of that character that it has, I think would be a big loss for the neighborhood.
Okay. Well, we'll look for an update on that also. So lots to talk about next week as well. Okay. Thanks for coming in.
Okay, good to be here.
We've been speaking with Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.